Kafka Hibino is a specialist in cleaning up the remains of giant monsters. His dream was to be part of the defense force which protects the city from these monsters. But since he's already 30, he thinks he's too old and weak for it. However, with a parasite in play, everything might change. Hello, my friends, it's Uncle Itachi here, and in today's video, we're going to do a deep dive into episodes 1 to 3 of Kaijuu number 8. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. The episode begins with another ordinary day in Japan, when suddenly a security alert warns the residents to go to the safety shelter. Then, out of nowhere, a giant creature appears. It was a kaiju, my friend. It starts to destroy the entire city. A woman informs that the monster is about 60 meters tall, and is moving from Yadabashi City to Yamashita City. Look at the eyes of this beast, man. The first division starts firing multiple missiles at the monster, but it's not helping at all. Suddenly, the helicopter door opens, and now things are about to heat up, my friend. A girl jumps out of the helicopter with her rifle in hand. The guys start shooting at the kaiju, and an insane battle begins, my friend. The guys advance, and the kaiju tries to attack them until a girl appears holding a bazooka. She shoots the kaiju in the chest, and the guy is done for. When you look again, the entire city is raining ketchup, my friend. Suddenly, the scene cuts to a guy eating a sandwich. Now that the heroes have saved the city, it's time for our hero garbage collectors to clean up this mess. Then the scene cuts to the residents applauding the 3rd Division for killing that giant Pokemon. Suddenly, a worker walks side by side with the 3rd Division's captain. The scene cuts, and our protagonist Kafka Hibino starts to vent, saying that their battle only begins after the others finish, and that this is why they are not applauded. He warns another worker not to lift something yet because it would go wrong. The guy says he can handle it, and then the giant Pokemon's blood burns his skin. Serves him right for not listening to his partner's advice. Speaking of advice, I advise you to like the video, or a giant monster will appear in your room. Friends warn friends. Then the scene cuts to our protagonist, frustrated, as they now have a long job ahead of them. Suddenly, his boss says he needs to take care of another area. Kafka asks where, and his boss tells him to go to the intestines. Kafka is not happy with the news. The guy asks if working in the intestines is that bad, and the guy says people sent there can't eat for a while. Kafka starts cleaning the kaiju's intestines, and there's poop flying everywhere, my friend. The scene cuts, and Kafka arrives home exhausted, still smelling the crap. Then a news report starts on TV about the 3rd Division's captain, thanking her for defeating that giant kaiju. Suddenly, Kafka has a memory of him and her, as they had promised to join the armed forces together. Kafka turns off the TV and regrets not being by her side, as he's now 30 and cleaning up giant Pokemon poop. The day dawns, and he arrives at work. A chubby guy greets him, saying this is the new employee, Ichikawa, who also wants to join the defense force. Kafka is impressed, as that was his childhood dream. Kafka feels awkward, and Ichikawa asks why he gave up. Kafka says he's tried everything, but it's not for him, and that Ichikawa will understand when he's older. Ichikawa says he won't give up because he won't quit, and Kafka is annoyed, wondering if giving up on his dream is really that bad. After a while, it's time to work, right? After all, their job is long. Their boss says the rookie is going to the intestines, and Kafka laughs, but then he finds out he has to go too. He asks why he has to go 2 days in a row, and the guy says it's because he's very good at the intestines. They start cleaning all the poop, and the scene cuts to lunchtime. The guys are nauseated. Kafka asks if Ichikawa will eat his lunchbox, and Ichikawa says he can't. Kafka throws him a vitamin drink and tells him to have something in his stomach if he wants to handle the job, and that he'll need those nose plugs too. Ichikawa says he doesn't understand anything Kafka is saying and doesn't need them. They start acting like kids until it's time to go home and rest. The chubby guy is already thinking about getting home and eating. Kafka thanks God the worst part of the job is done. Then Ichikawa appears, thanking Kafka for being so nice to him on his first day and saying they are raising the age limit to 32 for joining the defense force and that Kafka shouldn't give up. Kafka says he's a good guy. Suddenly, a kaiju with a big mouth appears. When it was about to devour him, our protagonist saves him. The guy is dizzy, barely opening his eyes, and is saved again. Kafka shouts for him to run. The spider climbs the wall, and Kafka says that if he wants to be in the defense force, he can't die. Ichikawa runs away, and Kafka distracts the kaiju. Suddenly, the spider starts chasing him. I've seen guys run from their mom's slipper, but this is the first time from a mutant spider. The spider almost caught him, but the guy is too fast, my friend. Suddenly, he sees a tunnel and runs into it. The spider almost caught him, but he was too fast. Then he sees a light at the end of the tunnel and jumps from there. Suddenly, he has a memory of the girl crying because the kaiju destroyed a large part of the city, including their school. The girl named Mina says she's sad because her kitten died. They start talking and promise each other to join the defense force together. Kafka says they'll see who becomes the coolest officer. The flashback ends, and the big spider is behind him. Look at that spider's face, man. It looks like it's been sniffing something. Kafka grabs a metal bar and says he's not afraid of kaiju. He starts trembling with fear, and the spider hits him in the chest. The kaiju surrounds him and starts licking its lips. He even thinks about running away, but the spider bites him. Suddenly, Ichikawa appears and smacks the creature with a shovel. Kafka tells him to run, and Ichikawa says if he had abandoned Kafka there, he would never join the defense force. Kafka remembers Mina and says he's useless, unable to protect his friends. Kafka screams, and suddenly a tiger appears. The spider starts getting shot and is dead in the blink of an eye, my friend. Kafka is scared, and suddenly Mina appears. She says the target is down and walks away. Kafka starts to zone out as he's lost a lot of blood. Until the scene cuts and they're at the hospital, he starts thinking and says that the girl was really badass and that she had already surpassed him a long time ago. Ichikawa calls him, and he feels embarrassed. He says that if it weren't for Kafka, he'd be dead, and that Kafka was pretty cool. He remembers his promise to the girl again. Ichikawa tells him that he should join the force, and he starts thinking, saying that he couldn't hide that he still wanted to join the force since it was his dream. Suddenly, and he's shocked as it flies into his mouth. He starts writhing, and Ichikawa asks what's going on. When he checks, he sees it. That's right, my friend. Kafka had just turned into a kaiju. He looks at his reflection in the glass and is startled. He tells Ichikawa not to be scared, saying he's still Kafka. Suddenly, an old man appears with a cell phone in his hand. Meanwhile, the girl named Mina is taking a bath and remembers that Kafka told her not to be afraid, and that if she ever felt scared, he would be there to protect her. Then her phone rings, and she gets the news that there was a kaiju in the hospital, and she says she's going to take it down. Then it cuts to the scene where she tells the squad that the kaiju had been spotted inside the hospital and that they were going to kill it soon. Meanwhile, the old man was scared out of his mind. Ichikawa tells Kafka to try smiling, and he makes a face, causing the old man to faint. When he tries to help, he ends up destroying things with his great strength. The patients go to check out the noise and come face to face with him. Ichikawa says it's better for them to get out of there before the force arrives. He opens the window and sees how strong he is. They jump out the window and the guy makes a huge leap. Look at this man, the guy is overpowered. Meanwhile, the defense force is preparing to capture the kaiju. The two start running, and Ichikawa wonders if Kafka being a kaiju is something to worry about. When he looks, Kafka is all deformed. He says he doesn't know how to control it yet. He opens his mouth, and his kaiju instincts take over as he devours the pigeon. When he returns to normal, he says he needs to pee. Ichikawa asks how he's going to do that, and suddenly, the guy starts peeing from his nipples. Man, this anime is wild. Kafka starts to freak out and asks if he still has a chance to join the force, and Ichikawa says no. If they see him like that, they'll kill him. Kafka starts wondering what will happen to him now that he had decided to pursue his dream. Suddenly, he senses something and says it's coming from the ground. It was another kaiju, my friend. The girl tells them to split up, and she goes after the new kaiju. Then it cuts to a little girl crying. Her mother tells her to leave, and she says she'll try to save her mother. The kaiju starts looking at her, and just as it's about to eat her, our protagonist shows up and punches the creature in the face. He asks the girl if she's okay, but she's scared. He tries to smile at her, but it only makes things worse. Kafka removes the furniture from on top of her mother, and Ichikawa says she'll be fine. Suddenly, another spider-like kaiju appears, and Kafka says he's going to take it down. He counts to 3, accumulates a lot of energy, and lands a punch that destroys the creature completely. He's impressed with his strength, and it starts raining blood. He tells the little girl to stay calm, that everything will be fine, but she's scared. He starts walking and she thanks him. Then he has another flashback with her and starts imagining fighting alongside her. Ichikawa tells them they should leave quickly. Kafka manages to return to his human form a bit and tells him he's not going to give up. Just then, the defense force arrives, and they notice that someone had done the job for them. She asks the little girl about the kaiju she saw today, but the girl remembers the scene and gets scared. The girl tells her not to worry, then runs to Kafka, shouting that he passed. When he arrives, Kafka is eating with his kaiju face on. Ichikawa dropkicks him and tells him to be more careful. Kafka says he didn't notice. He asks if it looks okay now, and Ichikawa starts yelling at him like a mom. When Kafka looks at his letter, he says he's happy. Ichikawa says he thought he'd react better, and Kafka says he always messes up on the first phase. Ichikawa asks if he's really going to take the test, and Kafka says no one will notice. Ichikawa starts yelling at him again. Kafka says he's already 32, which is the maximum age to join, and that he's not going to give up. After all, it's his last chance. He tries to open the lid but can't. So he uses his power, and Ichikawa starts yelling at him again. Look at this guy. They're such idiots. Then the day of the test arrives, and they're excited. Ichikawa is impressed by the size of the place. He tells Kafka that if he transforms there, he'll be killed in seconds. Suddenly, the students for this year start appearing. A girl shows up and calls him old man, telling him to pay more attention when she's talking. He says he's not an old man, that he's only 32. They say he's already old. She asks if that old piece of junk is his and says it's in her way. He says there are other spots, and she says her lucky number is 5. He gets mad and tells her to be more polite. Suddenly, she opens her jacket, and he pretends not to look. Her outfit starts glowing, and she lifts the car like it's a bag of rice. They're both impressed by her strength, and she throws the old car away. Kafka says the car was from the company. He asks who she is, and she says she's Kakoru Shinomiya and that her hobby is killing kaijus. She says Kafka smells like kaiju. Ichikawa says it's because they work cleaning up kaiju remains, and she asks what two garbage men are doing there. Kafka lifts the car, and she looks impressed. He says he's candidate 2032, for her not to forget his name. Meanwhile, the butler took his spot, and he got annoyed. She says it might be fun, and that she'll put him in his place. Ichikawa says it hasn't even been 5 minutes, and he's already used his powers. He says it was just one hand. The two guards tell them to stop stalling and get going. Ichikawa says that if he messes up again, he'll send him home. Then the scene cuts and the training begins. Kafka realizes he can't keep up with the younger candidates. They start doing pull-ups and exercises, and Kafka says that's how people get after 30. He mentions that if he used his kaiju power, he'd definitely do better than anyone else. Then the results come, and he's ranked 219 out of 225 people. That girl shows up and starts mocking him, and he asks her to forget his name. Ichikawa says he's proud of him for not using his kaiju powers. Kafka says it wouldn't be fair to use his power, but without it, passing the test would be difficult. Then the scene cuts, and the captain reviews this year's candidate list. Meanwhile, Ichikawa shows off the best students, who are too tough to be surpassed. But actually, the one drawing the most attention is that sassy blonde girl. She's only 16 and already graduated, being the biggest talent to emerge in recent years. She appears in front of Kafka, saying he finally discovered how amazing she is. Kafka says he didn't know she was like that, and he gets crushed by her bodyguards. She mocks him and leaves him talking to himself. Ichikawa says the next test will be easier, just testing their knowledge about kaijus, since it's not enough to just know how to kill the monsters. Kafka feels overly confident. Then the scene cuts and they go to the final test. A guy introduces himself as Hashina, the vice captain, and says their task is to find and kill kaijus. The guys are immediately in shock. The creature tries to attack them, but the grid stops it right away. Kafka calls him a liar, and he says he didn't know the rules changed this year. But to compensate, they get to use a state-of-the-art suit that fuses with their body, immensely multiplying their power. Their operator says she'll check their power levels. Ichikawa is at 8%, the green-haired guy at 18%, another guy at 15%, and the pink-haired guy at 24%, but he's not satisfied. They say the suit's power increases with training. When they check Kakoru Shinomiya's level, it's at 46%. Everyone is surprised, and the vice captain says she's already at the level of a platoon leader. The operators say it's the highest achievement for a first-time suit user. Ichikawa feels a bit sad about his 8%, but the vice captain reassures him, saying you only fail with 0%, and he's never seen a 0 in his life. When they check Kafka's level, it's at 0%, and the vice captain starts laughing at him. Kafka strains, and the vice captain tells him to stop or he'll soil himself. Kakoru Shinomiya tells him to stop fooling around and show the power he used in the parking lot. The vice captain says now that they're in the suits, it's time to start the final test. The scene cuts, and he says their goal is to exterminate all the kaijus, facing them with kaiju weapons while being monitored by drones the entire time. If they're about to die, the suit's shield will activate, but they'll fail the test. The battle begins, and the boastful blonde girl starts taking out kaijus, impressing the operator. Kafka tells Ichikawa not to fall behind, but he struggles with the weapon's weight. With his suit at 0%, he's weaker than the others. Then the vice captain announces that Captain Mina Ishiro is watching them, urging them to get her attention. Kafka remembers their promise. They discuss that if the goal was just to kill kaijus, there wouldn't be drones everywhere, so maybe they need to do something else. They start providing support. The guys shoot at the kaiju, but it's ineffective. Kafka remembers he cleaned a kaiju like this before and has an idea. He throws a flash grenade at the creature and tells them to shoot its belly, where the skin is weaker. It works, my friend. The protagonist is badass. The guy thanks him, saying his support was great. The captains are surprised. As they celebrate, a kaiju suddenly swipes at him. The operator sees the critical signs on the screen, indicating he could die. Kafka remembers that if his shield activates, he'll fail the test. He tries to get up, but just as the kaiju is about to bite him, the blonde girl appears and fills the kaiju with bullets. She tells him he can lie down while she takes out the rest. The guys try to get some kills, but she leaves nothing for them. Kafka tries to get up, but his leg is broken. The vice captain talks to him, suggesting he should give up. Kafka remembers the 0% and says he needs to catch up. The vice captain says that in his case, not even the shields would be effective. Kafka replies that he's the one who decides if he'll give up, and even at 32, he won't abandon his dream. He starts pushing himself and stands up, my friend. When they check, it goes from 0 to 0.1%, my man. The girl is surprised he's standing with a broken leg. And that's how the episode ends, my friends. That's it, my friend, the video ends here. If you like Kaiju number 8 and want to continue this adventure, don't forget to comment down below. Thanks for watching, we're together, and see you next time.
If you try, you just might get it.